Hi everyone, I'm Olga, and welcome to my channel, Stories Untold, where you can find intrigue, love secrets, and family dramas. Subscribe to my channel to get new stories every day.
You know what's worse than being lied to? Building the lie with your own hands, mixing the concrete, laying the foundation, watching it rise brick by brick, all while believing it's yours. I spent 8 months in rural Thailand thinking I was building our future. Turns out, I was just the unpaid contractor for someone else's marriage. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. I met Anshan at a gym in Bangkok, where she was training to become a fitness instructor. I was 58, newly retired from running kitchens for 30 years, and looking for something real after my divorce back in Seattle. She was 29, spoke decent English, and had this way of making me feel like I wasn't just another lonely expat throwing money around. "You different from other men?" she'd tell me while we shared street food near her apartment. "You not just want young girl, you want partner." I believed her because I wanted to believe her. After my ex-wife took half my retirement savings and left me feeling like a failure at everything that mattered, Anshan made me feel valuable again. Needed. Like I had something to offer besides just money. We'd been together 6 months when she started talking about Aizen. Her family's village, she said. Simple life, cheap land, fresh air. "We can build small house," she'd say, sketching with her finger on my chest while we lay in my cramped Bangkok apartment. "You know construction from restaurant work, yes? I know local people, good price." The idea hooked me immediately. After decades of cramped commercial kitchens and a messy divorce that took half my savings, the thought of building something from scratch felt like redemption. Anshan painted pictures with her words: morning coffee, watching rice fields, evening meals under our own roof, maybe even a small garden where I could grow herbs like back home. "My family help us," she'd promise. "They know builders. Good materials. We make beautiful life together." Looking back, I should have asked more questions, like why she never wanted to video call her family, or why she got nervous whenever I suggested we visit the village first before committing to building. But I was lonely, and she was selling exactly the dream I needed to buy. The red flags were there from the start. She'd disappear for hours without explanation, claiming family business or training requirements. Her phone was always face down. When I asked about her past relationships, she'd get vague and change the subject. "Only you matter now," she'd say, and I'd melt every time. "But what about before me?" I'd press sometimes. "Before you, I just survive. Now I live." 3 weeks after our first conversation about Aizen, I found myself wiring $40,000 to a Thai bank account she said belonged to her uncle. "Land purchase," she explained. "Must move fast or someone else buy." I should have slowed down, should have hired a lawyer, done research, visited the damn place first. But Anshan had this way of making every delay feel like doubt in our relationship. "You not trust me?" she'd ask, and I'd cave every time. "Of course I trust you." "Then why you need lawyer? Why you need other people opinion? We make decision together, just you and me." The money left my account on a Tuesday. By Friday, we were on a bus heading northeast toward a village I'd never seen, to build a house on land I'd never stepped foot on. The village was smaller than I'd imagined. 30 houses scattered along a dirt road, rice paddies stretching toward mountains I couldn't name. No English signs. No other foreigners. And definitely no cell phone signal unless you climbed the hill behind the temple. Anshan's family surrounded us the moment we stepped off the local bus. Her mother, tiny and weathered, smiled but never looked directly at me. 2 brothers who spoke no English but kept slapping my back and laughing. A sister who stared like I was an exotic animal. And her father, who shook my hand once then ignored me completely. "They very happy you here," Anshan translated, though their body language suggested something more complicated. "What are they saying?" I asked as rapid Thai filled the air around us. "They say you very handsome, very strong, good man for building house. But the conversation seemed more intense than simple compliments. I caught worried glances, hushed tones, even what sounded like arguments. The land we'd bought sat at the village edge, 2 acres of scrubby dirt with a single mango tree and a view of someone else's rice field. It looked nothing like the fertile paradise she'd described, but Anchan was already pacing off dimensions, pointing where the house would sit. "Perfect spot," she announced. "Morning sun, evening shade. Very lucky position." I nodded and tried to feel the same excitement, but something was off. The neighbors kept driving by slowly, staring at us like we were putting on a show. One old man stopped his motorcycle and had a heated conversation with Anchan in rapid Thai. She laughed it off, but I caught tension in her voice. "What was that about?" I asked. "Nothing important. He just curious about house design." He seemed upset. No, Thai people just talk loud. Sound angry, but not angry." That night, we stayed with her family in a wooden house that creaked with every step. I lay on a thin mattress listening to voices from the next room, Anchan arguing with someone in urgent whispers. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Stress. Maybe panic. When I asked her about it the next morning, she waved it away. Just family business. They excited about construction starting. But her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and for the first time since leaving Bangkok, I wondered if I'd made a massive mistake. I was committed now, though. The money was spent, the land was bought, and I was 8 hours from the nearest city, with no way to get there except through Anchan. Construction started the following Monday. Anchan's uncle showed up with 3 workers and a truck full of materials that looked suspiciously new for a village where everything else seemed held together with wire and hope. I threw myself into the work. After 30 years in restaurant management, I knew how to organize a project, manage workers, solve problems. This felt familiar, even if the language barrier made everything harder. I sketched plans, calculated materials, worked alongside the crew mixing concrete and laying block. The house design was simple: 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, open kitchen and living area, covered porch facing the rice fields. Nothing fancy, but solid. A place where 2 people could build a quiet life together. "You work very hard," Anchan would say, bringing me water and watching me measure foundation lines. "Thai men not work like this." "How do Thai men work?" "They drink beer. Tell other people what to do. You different. You do work yourself." I took it as a compliment. Maybe that's why she chose me, an American who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Someone who'd build her the life she deserved. But the isolation was starting to get to me. Without cell signal, I couldn't call friends back home, couldn't check email, couldn't even Google translate basic Thai phrases. I was completely dependent on Anchan for communication with workers, neighbors, her family. Everything filtered through her voice, her interpretation. Strange things kept happening. Deliveries would arrive when I wasn't around: expensive tiles, fancy fixtures, more materials than our simple house required. When I asked about it, Anchan's explanations got vague. "Uncle, get good deal on materials. Better we buy now than pay more later." "But this is marble. We agreed on ceramic tile." "Marble, same price." "Uncle, no supplier. Get discount." The workers seemed to know more about the house plans than I did. They'd start tasks I hadn't approved, build walls in configurations I hadn't designed. When I questioned them, they'd shrug and point to Anchan. "Boss lady say do this way." They'd explain, through gestures. I started feeling like a supervisor being supervised, a manager being managed. This was supposed to be our project, but increasingly it felt like I was just the funding source and manual labor for someone else's vision. 3 weeks into construction, I found detailed architectural drawings hidden in Anchan's bag, professional blueprints showing a much larger house than what we'd discussed. Extra rooms, expensive details, even a second kitchen. When I confronted her, she laughed it off. "Just dreaming about future additions. You not like planning ahead?" "These aren't dreams, Anchan. These are professional drawings. Who made these? Friend in Bangkok, architecture student. I ask him draw possibilities. But her hands were shaking when she said it. I found the first clue in the tool shed we'd built to store construction materials. Wedged behind a stack of cement bags was a motorcycle helmet. Expensive, well used. Definitely not Anchan's size. Whose helmet is this? I asked her that evening. She barely glanced at it. Maybe worker forget. I asked tomorrow. But the next day, 2 more items appeared. Work boots, size 42, caked with red clay from our construction site. A leather tool belt worn smooth from years of use. Both hidden in places I wouldn't normally look, like someone was storing them temporarily. I started paying closer attention. There were phone calls Anchan would take outside, walking toward the rice fields where I couldn't hear. Conversations that made her pace back and forth, gesturing with her free hand. When she'd return, she'd seem agitated, distracted. Everything okay? I'd ask. Just family business. Always some drama in village. What kind of drama? at.com, at.a, at.com. Neighbor problems, land disputes, nothing important. The workers started acting differently around me too, less joking, more formal. They'd glance at each other when they thought I wasn't watching, having quiet conversations that stopped whenever I approached. One afternoon, while mixing concrete, I overheard them talking about the other Farang. At least, that's what it sounded like. When I asked Anchan to translate, she said they were discussing a television show, but Farang meant foreigner, and I was the only foreigner in the village. The breaking point came when I found cigarette butts behind the house. Marlboro Reds, smoked down to the filter. I'd quit smoking 5 years ago, and Anchan didn't smoke. The workers rolled their own cigarettes from local tobacco. Someone else was spending time at our construction site. Someone with expensive gear, international cigarettes, and enough familiarity with the project to leave personal items lying around. I started checking the site early in the mornings and late at night. No signs of disturbance, no evidence of vandalism or theft. But those personal items kept multiplying. A coffee mug, reading glasses, even a phone charger that definitely wasn't mine. Anchan, I said one evening, I think someone's been using our construction site. Maybe we should talk to village security. She went completely pale. No need involve other people. Probably just curious neighbors. I handle it. Handle what? What's going on? Nothing going on. You worry too much. This Thailand, not America. People different here. But she wouldn't look at me when she said it. The invitation came during our 6th week of construction. Anchan's family was hosting a celebration for her cousin's wedding, and they wanted me there as guest of honor. Very important you come, she insisted. Show respect to family, build good relationship. I was hesitant. Big social events without shared language usually meant sitting in corners, smiling politely while conversations flowed around me. But Anchan made it sound crucial for our acceptance in the village. If I don't go, then they think you not serious about me, think you just play around. And if I do go, then they see you good man, committed man, maybe help us more with house. The celebration was at her uncle's house, the same uncle who'd been coordinating our construction materials. The yard was filled with plastic tables, string lights, and the kind of setup that suggested this was a bigger deal than Anchan had let on. That's when I saw him. Tall, late 30s, wearing a crisp white shirt and dark jeans that looked expensive even by Bangkok standards. He moved through the crowd like he belonged, shaking hands, embracing relatives, clearly comfortable in a way that suggested deep familiarity. "Who's that?" I asked Anchan. Her face went rigid. "Cousin from Bangkok. He come for wedding." But the way her family interacted with him told a different story. This wasn't distant cousin politeness, this was immediate family warmth. Her mother hugged him like a son, Her father offered him the honored seat at the main table. Her brothers deferred to him in conversations. And then I noticed his hands, calloused from construction work, a specific pattern of scars across his knuckles that I recognized from my own years of manual labor. This man built things for a living. During dinner, he kept glancing at our table, not curious tourist glances, knowing looks. Once, when Anchan got up to help serve food, he approached me. "You building house in village?" he said in careful English. "Yes. With my girlfriend Anchan." Something flickered across his face. "Very nice. Good location, that land. You know it?" "I know all land around here. Born in this village." We talked for maybe 5 minutes about construction costs, material quality, worker reliability. He knew details about our project that surprised me, specific suppliers we'd used, challenges with the foundation, even which workers were part of our crew. "How do you know so much about our house?" I finally asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Small village. Everyone know everything. What's your name? Come on." When Anchan returned, the conversation died immediately. She positioned herself between us, spoke to him quickly in Thai, and he walked away without another word. "What was that about?" I asked. "Nothing important. He just being polite to guest. He knew a lot about our construction." Everyone know about construction. Big project for small village. But for the rest of the evening, she watched him like a hawk, and he avoided our table completely. The phone call happened on a Tuesday morning while I was measuring roof lines. Anchan's phone rang from inside the half-built house, and she was nowhere around, probably walking to the village market like she did most mornings. The ringing wouldn't stop. 15, 20 rings echoing off the concrete walls. Finally, thinking it might be important, I went inside to find it. The phone was on the kitchen counter. Screen lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID was in Thai script, but underneath in English letters, it said, "Husband." My hands started shaking. I stared at that word, husband, trying to make it mean something else. Maybe a nickname. Maybe a translation error. Maybe anything, except what it obviously meant. The ringing stopped. Immediately started again. Same caller ID. Same word. I set the phone down and walked outside, my heart hammering against my ribs. This had to be a mistake. Some confusion with contact labels, maybe left over from an old phone or a shared device. But deep down, I knew. Anchan returned 20 minutes later, carrying vegetables and humming like everything was normal. She grabbed her phone, saw the missed calls, and her face went white. "Problem?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "No problem. Just work calls from Bangkok. Training program, they need papers." She stepped outside to call back. I could hear her voice through the unfinished walls, urgent, defensive, occasionally pleading. The conversation lasted 15 minutes. When she came back, she was different. Distracted. Nervous energy that made her pace around the construction site, checking things that didn't need checking. "Everything okay with your training program?" I asked. "Yes, fine. Just bureaucracy. Very complicated in Thailand." "What kind of papers do they need?" "Certificate papers, proof of training hours, boring stuff." But she couldn't look at me directly. And for the first time since we'd arrived in the village, I started paying attention to all the things that hadn't made sense. The expensive materials, the architectural drawings, the man at the wedding who knew too much about our house, the personal items appearing and disappearing around the construction site. That night, I lay awake listening to Anchan sleep beside me, and a terrible possibility started taking shape in my mind. What if this wasn't our house at all? I waited 3 days before acting on my suspicions. 3 days of watching Anchan more carefully, noting her patterns, listening to her phone conversations. 3 days of feeling like an idiot for not seeing what was probably obvious to everyone except me. On Friday morning, She left for the market as usual. This time, I followed. The village was small enough that tracking someone required careful distance. I stayed back, using construction sites and parked vehicles for cover, feeling ridiculous but needing answers. Anchan didn't go to the market. Instead, she walked to the other end of the village, toward a cluster of newer houses I'd barely noticed. She stopped at a modest home with a red roof and well-maintained garden, pulled out keys, and let herself inside like she lived there. I waited across the road, hidden behind a neighbor's truck, for 45 minutes. When she emerged, she wasn't alone. The man from the wedding walked out behind her. Come on. Same expensive clothes. Same confident posture. But now I could see something I'd missed at the celebration, the casual intimacy between them. The way he touched her shoulder, the way she leaned into him naturally. They talked for maybe 10 minutes on the front steps. From my distance, I couldn't hear words, but their body language told the story. This wasn't cousin politeness or family discussion. This was domestic familiarity, relationship planning, maybe even argument about something serious. Then she kissed him. Not a family peck on the cheek, a real kiss. Long, comfortable, like people who'd been doing it for years. I felt sick, actually nauseous, like I'd been punched in the stomach. Everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. The phone contact labeled husband. His knowledge about our construction project. The expensive materials and architectural plans. Even the personal items appearing around our work site. I wasn't building my house with my girlfriend. I was building his house with his wife. When Anshan returned to our construction site an hour later, carrying vegetables like she'd actually been shopping, I was mixing concrete with mechanical precision, trying to process what I'd seen. "Good morning, darling," she said, kissing my cheek with the same lips that had been on his. "Workers make good progress today." I nodded and kept working, but inside I was screaming. How long had this been going on? How many other expats had she done this to? How much of my money had gone toward building someone else's life? And the worst question of all, what was I going to do about it? I confronted her that evening after the workers left. We were sitting on the unfinished porch, watching sunset over rice fields that suddenly felt like someone else's view. The house around us, our supposed dream home, felt like a monument to my stupidity. "Anshan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." She looked up from her phone, where she'd been texting someone in Thai. "Of course. What you want know? Are you married?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I watched her face cycle through emotions, surprise, calculation, and finally something that might have been relief. "Why you ask this?" "Because I saw you today. At the house with the red roof. With come on." She went completely still. "You follow me? Answer the question. Are you married?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, "Yes." The word hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting it. "How long?" 5 years. "And this house? Whose house are we building?" Ah. 5 years. Another silence. His house. Our house. His. And mine. I stood up, paced to the edge of the porch, came back. "So what am I? What is this?" "You are. Good man. Kind man. We need money for house, and you need someone to love you. Everyone win." The casualness of it was almost worse than the betrayal, like I was a business transaction, not a human being with feelings. "Everyone win?" "Anshan, I gave you $40,000. I've been working construction for 2 months. I thought we were building a life together. We are building life. Just different life than you think. Different. I'm building your husband's house. With my money, with my labor." She started crying then, but even her tears felt calculated. "I never want to hurt you, but we desperate. His family lose money, Bank threatened to take land. We need help, and you have money, you have skills. So you decided to steal from me. Not steal. Partnership. You help us, we give you good time, show you Thailand, make you feel loved. Make me feel loved? Anchan, this is fraud. This is theft. I couldn't even finish the sentence. The scope of the deception was too large to process. Please, she said, reaching for my hand, don't be angry. We can still make this work. Make what work? You're married. Many Thai women have boyfriend and husband. Not problem if everyone understand. I didn't understand. You lied to me. I never lie. I just not tell everything at same time. But I was already walking away. The full scope of my situation hit me that night as I lay on the thin mattress in her family's house, listening to muffled conversations from the next room. I was 8 hours from Bangkok, in a village where I didn't speak the language, completely dependent on people who'd been lying to me for months. My money was gone. 40,000 in land purchase, another 15,000 in construction materials and labor. Money that had built a house I'd never own, on land that was never mine. For a woman who belonged to someone else. But worse than the financial loss was the isolation. I had no way to leave without Anchan's help. No way to communicate with anyone without her translation. No way to even call for help without cell phone signal. I was trapped in a lie that everyone except me seemed to understand. The next morning, I tried to take control of the situation. I asked Anchan to drive me to the nearest town with internet access so I could contact the American embassy, maybe find legal help, at least figure out my options. Cannot go today, she said. Truck broken. Maybe tomorrow. But the truck looked fine. When I tried to examine it myself, her brother appeared and shook his head, gesturing that I shouldn't touch it. I asked about the bus schedule to Bangkok. No bus today. Only twice per week. I asked to borrow someone's motorcycle to drive myself. Too dangerous for Farang. Not no roads. Every avenue of escape was blocked by helpful concern that felt more like imprisonment. The construction continued around me like nothing had changed. Workers showed up, made progress on the house, took direction from Anchan like I wasn't even there. The house that was supposed to represent our future together was being completed for someone else's marriage. I felt like I was watching my own life from outside my body. Still mixing concrete, still solving construction problems, still playing the role of devoted boyfriend building a dream home. But now I knew the truth. I wasn't the builder. I wasn't the boyfriend. I wasn't even the victim. I was just the funding source that hadn't figured out how to turn itself off. The truth came out in pieces over the next few days, like pulling threads from a sweater until the whole thing unraveled. Her husband's name was Kamon. He'd been working construction in Bangkok for 3 years, sending money home to support his family and save for a house. Then the pandemic hit, work dried up, and their savings evaporated. They were facing foreclosure on the land, bankruptcy, the complete destruction of everything they'd worked toward. That's when they developed the plan. Anchan would get a job at a Bangkok gym, meet older Western men, build relationships with ones who seemed lonely and financially stable. She'd sell them the dream of rural Thailand, simple living, building a life together. The men would provide funding and labor for construction. When the house was finished, she'd find reasons for the relationship to end naturally. I was the third one. Third? I asked when she told me. What happened to the first two? First one was German man. He pay for land, site preparation. Very organized, very efficient. But he gets suspicious after 4 months. Hire lawyer in Bangkok. We have to end relationship quick. And the second? Australian man. Very strong, good worker. He do foundation, framing, most of heavy work, but he find out about Kamon. Get very angry. Have heart attack from stress. Heart attack? Yes. Very sad. He in hospital in Australia now. We send flowers. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. We weren't people to her. We were funding phases, labor phases, disposable resources in a construction timeline. How many more after me? I asked. She shrugged. Depends on what still need to be done. What if I refuse to help anymore? What if I just leave? Then you lose all money you already spend, and you're still stuck in village until we decide to help you get back to Bangkok. She said it matter-of-factly, without malice, just stating obvious facts about my powerlessness. I realized then that I hadn't just been scammed. I'd been kidnapped by kindness, imprisoned by my own hope, trapped by people who understood exactly how lonely men think and what they're willing to pay for. The breaking point came when I met their children. Kamon and Anchan had 2 kids, a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son, who'd been staying with grandparents in another province during the construction. On a Saturday morning, without warning, they arrived at the worksite. Beautiful children with their father's eyes and their mother's smile. They ran around the house I'd helped build, claiming bedrooms, planning where their toys would go, treating me like a friendly stranger who'd happened to help with their home. "This my room," the daughter announced in broken English, pointing to the smaller bedroom. "And this baby brother room. Very nice," I managed. "You'll be happy here. You help build house?" "Yes." "Thank you. House, very beautiful." I watched them explore with the pure joy of children who'd finally gotten the home they'd been promised. And despite everything, despite the lies and betrayal and theft, I felt happy for them. That's when I knew I was truly broken. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just empty, watching someone else's family inhabit the dream I'd paid for and built with my own hands. Anshan found me sitting alone on the porch that evening while her family celebrated inside. The house was essentially finished, just touch-up painting and final inspections remaining. "You sad," she observed. "I'm tired. House almost done. Very beautiful. You should be proud." "Proud? You build good house. Strong foundation, good materials, everything level and square. Come on, very impressed with your work." She meant it as a compliment. The final insult was that she genuinely thought I should be proud of being an excellent victim. "Anchan, I need to go back to Bangkok. Tomorrow." "Of course. House almost finished anyway. Come on, can handle last details." "And my money?" "What money?" "The money I invested in this project. What I'm owed for my labor." She looked genuinely confused. "You not owed money. You paid for good experience, good relationship, good memories. We give you all that." That night, I lay awake listening to her family plan their future in the house I'd built. Tomorrow, I'd figure out how to get back to Bangkok. Somehow, I'd rebuild my life from whatever pieces remained. But tonight, I grieved for the man I'd been before I met her. I started planning my escape at dawn. Not dramatic revenge or legal action, just basic survival. Getting out of the village, back to Bangkok, and then home to Seattle to figure out what was left of my life. The first challenge was transportation. Anchan's family controlled all vehicles, and the twice-weekly bus required advance booking through the village headman, who happened to be Kamon's uncle. I was trapped by rural logistics, as much as by deception. But 30 years in restaurant management had taught me to solve problems systematically. I started walking the village, looking for options. That's when I met Tom. Tom was a 63-year-old British expat who'd been living in the next village for 5 years. He rode his motorcycle past our construction site every few days, and I'd always assumed he was just curious about the foreign building project. Turns out, he'd been watching me with recognition and pity. "You're not the first," he told me over instant coffee at a roadside shop. "This village runs that scam maybe once a year. Always the same pattern: lonely expat, rural dream, house construction, sudden discovery. You knew? And didn't warn me? Mate, you think you would have listened? Men in love don't take advice from strangers." He was right. I would have dismissed him as jealous or bitter, just another expat warning about Thai women because his own relationship had failed. "The good news," Tom continued, "is you're not stuck. I can get you to Ubon Ratchathani tomorrow morning. From there, you can catch a bus or flight to Bangkok. What about my things? My passport? What things? The clothes Anshan bought you. The tools that belong to the project? Just take your passport and wallet and leave everything else. It's all tainted anyway. He was right about that too. Everything I owned in Thailand was connected to the lie. Keeping any of it would mean carrying reminders of my stupidity forever. Why help me? I asked. Because I've been where you are. Different woman, different scam, same feeling of being completely played. Someone helped me get out, and now I help the next guy. We shook hands, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I might actually survive this. The plan was simple. One more night in the village, then disappear at sunrise before anyone woke up. I left the village at 5:30 a.m., while Anshan's family was still sleeping, and the construction site sat empty in pre-dawn darkness. Tom waited on his motorcycle at the village edge, engine running quietly. I took one last look at the house I'd built. In the grey morning light, it looked perfect. Clean lines, solid construction, everything level and square like Anshan had said. Kamon's children would grow up in that house. His parents would spend their final years there. It would shelter a family for decades. I'd built something permanent and beautiful. It just wasn't mine. The ride to Ubon Ratchathani took 2 hours through countryside that looked like the postcards that had first attracted me to Thailand. Rice paddies reflecting morning sky, mountains covered in mist, villages waking up to another day of simple living. Everything I'd wanted was still there. I just understood now that wanting it and being able to have it were completely different things. At the bus station, Tom bought me coffee and waited while I booked passage to Bangkok. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Go home, figure out what's left, maybe start over." "And Thailand?" I thought about that. "I don't know. Maybe someday I'll come back as a tourist instead of a dreamer." The difference being? Tourists expect to pay for experiences and go home. Dreamers think they can buy a new life. Tom laughed. "You'll be all right, mate. It takes wisdom to know the difference." The bus arrived, a comfortable air-conditioned coach that would carry me back toward civilization, toward phone signals and internet access, and the complicated process of rebuilding my life. As we pulled away from the station, I thought about what I'd tell people back home. The truth was too complicated, too embarrassing, too specific to Thailand for most Americans to understand. I'd probably just say the relationship didn't work out, that rural life wasn't for me, that I'd learned some valuable lessons about international romance. All true, technically, but the real truth was simpler and harder. I'd been lonely enough to ignore every warning sign, generous enough to fund someone else's dream, and naive enough to believe that love and construction materials were the same thing. At least now I knew better. That had to count for something. The bus reached the highway, and I watched Thailand blur past the window, already becoming memory instead of future. Back in Seattle 6 weeks later, I started telling people I'd had an adventure in Thailand. Not a relationship, not a business investment, just an adventure that cost more than I'd planned and taught me things I hadn't expected to learn. My savings were gone, but I wasn't broke. Social security, a small pension from the restaurant union, and careful budgeting could cover a modest life. I found a studio apartment in Ballad, close enough to the water to smell salt air and remind myself that other places existed. Sometimes I wondered about the house. Was it finished? Were Kamon's children happy in their new bedrooms? Did Anshan ever think about the 3 men who'd funded her family's dream? Mostly, though, I tried not to wonder. The hardest part wasn't the money, or even the betrayal. It was accepting that my desire for connection had made me complicit in my own deception. Anshan hadn't forced me to wire money or work construction or ignore obvious warning signs. She'd simply offered what I was desperate to buy. I joined a cooking class at the community center, started volunteering at a food bank, began having coffee with neighbors I'd never bothered to meet before. Simple connections with people who weren't selling me anything except maybe their friendship. 3 months after returning, I got an email from Tom in Thailand. He'd driven past the village and seen the house was complete, painted white with blue trim, flower garden in front, laundry hanging from the covered porch. A family home, exactly as advertised. "Looks like good work," he wrote. "You should be proud of the craftsmanship, even if nothing else worked out." And strangely, I was proud. I'd built something solid and beautiful that would last for generations. The fact that I'd never live in it didn't diminish the quality of the construction or the satisfaction of creating something permanent. That's when I realized I'd learned something valuable in those Thai rice fields. I'd spent 30 years running restaurant kitchens feeding people, creating temporary satisfaction that disappeared with the last bite. But building that house had scratched a different itch, making something that would outlast me. I started looking into habitat for humanity, volunteer construction projects, ways to use my hands for something meaningful again. Not in Thailand, not for romance, not for escape. Just here, for people who needed help building their own dreams. The loneliness that had driven me to Southeast Asia was still there, but it felt different now. Less desperate, more like a fact to manage rather than a problem to solve with money and naive hope. 6 months later, I was framing walls for a single mother's house in Tacoma, working alongside other volunteers who'd found their own ways through disappointment towards something useful. Sometimes, between hammering nails and measuring cuts, I'd think about that morning in Eisen when I'd realized I was building someone else's life. The humiliation was gone now, replaced by something more complex. I'd been scammed, yes, but I'd also learned to build houses, survive complete isolation, and discovered that I was stronger than I'd thought. Most importantly, I'd learned the difference between buying love and earning it. The house in Thailand would always exist. Every time it sheltered Kamon's family from rain or heat, it would prove that even failed dreams can create something real. That had to count for something. Actually, it counted for everything.